All right, so usually I start these conversations about recidivism off with talking about the collateral consequences of recidivism. But I think all of us in this room and online know the impact that recidivism has on individuals, communities, the state more broadly. But our consistently high recidivism rates have reflected negatively on the department. So let me just say I'm with the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. So today I'm going to talk about what we are doing about recidivism. So judging a criminal justice agency because of their recidivism rate is arguably unfair because so many factors influence criminality and reoffending and recidivism. But in reality, correctional agencies do influence recidivism in one way or the other. Just going to prison increases the probability that someone will reoffend or recidivate. Being supervised by correctional officers with huge caseloads also increases the recidivism rate. But then there's the theoretical logic of prison, which is rehabilitation through programs and services that decrease antisocial cognitions and improve social capital and bonds. Plus, there's decades worth of empirical support for the rehabilitation abilities of carceral programs. So taken together, there's theoretical and empirical support for correctional programs and services and their ability to decrease the probability that somebody will return to incarceration or be justice involved once they're released from prison. So recidivism rates may not be the fairest judgment of or measure of success or failure for an agency, but I think that it does signal something is amiss with the rehabilitation efforts or abilities, or both, in a correctional agency. And it calls for evaluation research, which is where I come in. As an applied researcher in the department, it's my job to assess the extent to which our programs and services adhere to the scientific literature or evidence-based practices. So since I started in late 2020, my team and I have evaluated several programs, including our sex offender programs for male and females, our substance use programs, reentry services programs, and programs for just general reoffending antisocial cognitions. Our assessments take an in-depth look at data, the content of the programs, delivery, staff, how people are placed in the programs, the assessment tools used in the program and before, what they target, and everything that the empirical literature says is needed to make an evidence-based program evidence-based, because we can't just pick and choose. You need all of it for it to be an evidence-based program. So regardless of which program we've assessed, the findings have been the same. And that is, they're not evidence-based. Our findings are presented or have been presented to leadership, program administrators, and programming staff in a detailed report that includes empirical and theoretically sound recommendations for improvement. The report's followed up usually with a presentation and several meetings, and then we trust that programming staff and administrators will implement the recommendations. So I can't really speak to the implementation piece of that, but I can tell you that our programs right now are not evidence-based. But last year, there were a lot of changes in the corrections realm in Arkansas. In January, we got a new secretary. In the spring, the PROTECT Act was passed, both of which made implementing evidence-based practices mandatory. So it was no longer optional. So in early December, me and my staff met with ACC and ADC treatment and programming staff, and again, talked about what practices are not evidence-based, what programs should target, who should be in those programs, how to target those criminogenic factors, and why all of this is important. So that's where we are now. So programming staff in both ACC and ADC are working on developing and implementing evidence-based programs in our prisons and centers. But now my team and I have turned to our attention to community supervision or treatment and community supervision. This piece is important because we know that the continuum of care from incarceration to release from supervision is important, and the most effective treatment for incarcerated or justice-involved individuals more broadly is that in the community. So in our field services, so our community supervision offices across the state, we are working with treatment staff on making sure we offer programs and services that address those 7 dynamic criminogenic needs. Additionally, we're in the process of obtaining a validated assessment tool that will help with program placement. So now we'll know people are placed in programs purposively based on their needs and risk level, and we'll be able to identify risk level. We are also continuing an initiative started by Joe Porfiry, what we're calling the Corrections Plan. The Corrections Plan is a dynamic, individualized, needs-based plan that outlines everyone's activities, from programs, services, jobs, educational opportunities that they will get from intake to release from community supervision. The plan is dynamic, and it will change as the individual and their circumstances change. And upon release, it turns into a portfolio of sorts where the required documentation they need to reduce reentry barriers and any certificates they earn during their time with us will be in this plan. So we're currently working with data tech companies to get that started. Additionally, we are, in constant contact with programming staff to answer their questions, to help in any way we can. And I know that evidence-based programs, evaluation research, a validated assessment tool, case plans are all linked to reduction in recidivism. So I know if we do this right, and I believe that we can, that recidivism rates will decrease, and which means the many collateral consequences of recidivism will decrease. And that's it. That's where we are and where we're going.